Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, we've got bad students, psycho customers, HOA Karens, all getting taught lessons they won't forget. I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. Okay, so let's begin. I work at a hotel and I'm on the graveyard shift, and we have a continental breakfast from 6 to 9 a.m. My shift ends at 7 a.m., so I'm in charge of setting up breakfast. It's not a big deal. It's a small hotel and a small breakfast, consisting of fruits, cereals, and toast. But we do have waffles and a couple of waffle makers. Basically, the guests come in, get their batter out of a dispenser, and then make their waffles so they're fresh and hot. So that said, we have two seasons where I live, winter and construction season. And we get work crews that stay at the hotel on the boss's dime, and then go for whatever job they're working on, and we very frequently get this one crew of guys. Now, they're great guys. They're polite, and they don't leave the breakfast room a mess, but their shift starts super early in the morning. We also get hunters who are in and out before 6, so usually I have everything set up by 5:30 for them. Now I say usually because I'm only human. Sometimes I'm running late, and it does happen, but I'm never more than 5 minutes after 6 o'clock. The workers and the hunters are super chill about it. They get it, and they don't complain about waiting a couple of extra minutes. I also feel the need to add that the foreman is amongst them, so he's eating when they are. So all of that said, one day, I'm running a little late. I got caught up with what I was doing, and I kind of lost track of time. So I was rushing to get everything set up, while the guys are patiently waiting in the lobby. In enters Karen, who sees the time. The woman sees the breakfast isn't ready, and she decides to yell at me for it, saying that the sign says breakfast is from 6 to 9, so it should be started exactly at 6. I tried to keep working while talking to her so I could get breakfast ready, but she decided that was rude, so she screams at me to stop what I was doing. I then stood there with her yelling at me until she ran out of breath, and then I finished setting up. But that wasn't all. Karen then complains to the manager, and I get a verbal warning that I have to have breakfast open by 6 o'clock, as I was about 15 minutes behind, all because Karen was yelling at me, when I would have been less than 4 if she would just let me finish. Well, Karen was a stayover, and she was in the next day before 6. The manager refunded a part of her stay under guest satisfaction, and I think she was hoping to find me doing something wrong so she could get another refund. But I was on my game this morning. I had everything set up by 5:30 like usual. She came in before the workers, and she saw me sitting at the front desk, and she sneers about me being lazy when I should be setting up breakfast. I told her breakfast was ready to go, as the construction workers are entering. But right after I do, I stand and walk over to block the doorway to the breakfast room. I then told all 20 workers that I can't let them in, because the manager said I had to start breakfast at exactly 6 o'clock. As I'm saying this, I'm looking directly at Karen. Slowly, the heads begin to turn, and Karen goes red. She then mutters something about coming back later, and then leaves. I let the guys go eat right after she leaves. I didn't see Karen again, so she either didn't come back or she returned after I left. But either way, I didn't hear another word from the manager about it. If you want your breakfast at 6 o'clock, Karen, you're gonna get your breakfast at 6 o'clock. Yeah, I think we can all agree that malicious compliance is the most satisfying when it's done on a nasty, entitled Karen. Also, super baffling how she wanted breakfast to be ready, but also wanted OP to stop preparing breakfast and stand there while she yelled at them for 15 minutes. Some people and their logic, I tell you, and if you guys thought that was a head shaker, listen to this next post. So a couple of months ago, I had a run-in with the self-appointed HOA enforcer of my neighborhood. Let's call her Linda since Karen's overused. And for some context, I don't live in an HOA community, but Linda likes to pretend we do. She's the kind of person who leaves passive-aggressive notes on cars, knocks on doors to complain about grass heights, and calls the city for violations that don't actually exist. Well, this issue started because I parked my car on the street in front of my house. It's perfectly legal, and I've been doing it for years without any complaints. But apparently, one day, Linda decided that my car was an eyesore. One morning, I find this note tucked under my windshield wiper. The note said, "This is not a parking lot. Park in your driveway like a respectful neighbor. Don't make me involve the city." Now, this note annoyed me, but I shrugged it off, and I kept parking where I always do. But that wasn't good enough for Linda. The next time, she confronts me in person. She screams in my face, and she says, "I've told you before, parking on the street is inconsiderate for others when you have an empty driveway. You have a driveway, so use it." That's when I tell Linda it's legal to park here and I'm not blocking anything. She then says it doesn't matter. You take up a parking spot that others who don't have driveways could be using. And your car's ugly and makes the neighborhood look bad. Park in your driveway or I will report you. That's when I decided, fine. If she wants me to park in my driveway, I'll park in my driveway. But I'll follow every single rule to the letter. You see, my driveway's small. If I park my vehicle in it, it sticks out, so it blocks the sidewalk. Technically, it's against city ordinances to obstruct the sidewalk. So the next day, I pull right into my driveway, perfectly centered, and guess what? It completely blocks the sidewalk. Of course, it didn't take long for Linda to notice. The woman marches up to my door, red-faced, and she's furious. She then says, "You can't block the sidewalk. That's illegal." To which I respond, "Oh, I thought you wanted me to park in my driveway." She then says, "Well, not like that. Park properly." I then tell Linda there's no other way to park in my driveway without blocking the sidewalk. Look how long my car is. I guess I'll have to park back on the street then. At that, her face was priceless. The woman sputters for a moment before stomping off. Thinking that was the end of it, I park back on the street. But no, Linda wasn't done yet. The woman actually called the city on me. A week later, a city inspector came by. He checks out the situation and saw that my car was legally parked on the street, and he told me I was doing nothing wrong. However, he did mention that Linda had several complaints about code violations in the neighborhood, and they were getting tired of her nonsense. After that, I didn't hear from Linda for a while until last week, when she starts parking her car on the street in front of my house to spite me. So I did what any good neighbor would do. I called and reported it. Now, not because she was in front of my house, but it turns out her car was slightly too close to a fire hydrant. The same city inspector came out and she got a ticket. Malicious compliance never felt so sweet. That ending is absolutely beautiful, isn't it? And seriously, I bet the city inspector was so done with Linda's crap and couldn't wait to ticket her car. Like, it's just so mind-boggling to me that some people have nothing better to do than complain about other people's cars in neighborhoods. Like, go get a hobby or something, Linda. And this person leaves a petty comment that reads, "Find a cheap, knackered old wreck of a car and park it on her drive while she's out, and then stand back and watch her head implode." So I told this story to a friend and she suggested I share it here. My family and I moved into a house in 2008. It had 5 bedrooms, 3,200 square feet, about $1,600 a month. It was decent price in 2008 and the rent stayed the same for many years. Since I'm reasonably handy, I would fix things up myself rather than bother an old man. I lived there so long that I also made quite a few upgrades. In 2024, the owner passes away, so his son inherits the property. A week later, he gave notice of intent to inspect the property. During inspection, he kept trying to open drawers, look through my belongings, all that stuff, which isn't legally allowed, and he was rude when I stopped him. As the guy left, he hands me a notice that my rent was increasing to $4,000 monthly, about $1,000 over market value. Now, I would have paid higher rent if it was reasonable, but I wasn't paying that much. My month-to-month lease was worded to require 3 months' notice to raise the rent. I pointed out this fact and then gave him notice that I would be moving out at the end of that 3 months. A few days later, I was served with an eviction notice. The month-to-month lease also required 3 months' notice to evict me without cause, so the guy tried evicting me with cause. He claimed that I made unauthorized modifications to the house, and he cited the back door with a dog door installed. I still had the original door in the garage and the previous owner's permission, so it was neither unauthorized nor a modification. Regardless, the judge decided that I needed to move out within 30 days or he would grant the eviction. Additionally, he explicitly ordered that all modifications be restored to the original. So here's where the malicious compliance comes in, and I'm sure you already see this coming. All the smart house additions I made were removed. The tool shed in the yard was removed, the pond was filled in, the closet organizers were torn out, and even the garage organizers removed. The updated appliance I had in the home were replaced with basic models. Every update I made was removed, and then I moved out. Well, the guy sues me for removing everything. His lawyer cited a law that says any changes to the property become part of the property, and it's illegal to remove them when vacating the property. However, my lawyer pointed out the order from the previous judge, stating all modifications must be restored to the original. I provided receipts for all the things I removed, proving that I added them and I was required to remove them. I won the case, and the guy had to pay my legal fees. A few months later, I get a call from his sister. Some of my mail had not been forwarded, and she wanted to ensure I got it. We had this short conversation about the entire ordeal. That's when she told me the house was actually inherited by 4 siblings. Her brother had lied to everyone. First, he had raised the rent, knowing I would move out. He already had a deal to sell the house to one of those big rental companies. He told his siblings the house had a negative equity and nobody would get anything from the sale, when in reality, the house was paid off and worth about $700,000. They had made an offer on the house which included all the stuff I later removed. He couldn't afford to replace everything, so they took him to court over the sale. Since all 4 siblings were listed as owners, all were named in the lawsuit, which is how they learned the truth. In the end, the house sold for $550,000. And here's the funny part. In exchange for not pressing fraud charges against him, his 3 siblings split the proceeds, and the guy got absolutely nothing. What a delicious, malicious compliance that was. And guys, you don't know how much I love the fact that that nasty brother got nothing in the end. Like, people who try to screw over family members should get nothing, and it serves him right for trying to get too greedy. And OP does pop in with an update, guys, that says a lot of people ask the same questions, so rather than respond to them individually, I'll post them here. Question number 1. How did everything happen so fast after the landlord died? I guess my wording wasn't clear. I don't actually know when he died. I only talk to the guy once or twice a year. This all started about a week after I was notified of his death in February 2024. I moved out in early June. We went to court over the removals in September, and I spoke with his sister in December. Everything I posted happened over the span of nearly a year. Question number 2. Why did I rent for 17 years instead of buying a house? I moved into the house during my divorce in 2008. Buying a house during a divorce is not easy. I chose this house because it was large enough for me and 3 kids and close to their schools. By the time they moved out, I was set in my ways. I planned to buy another place at some point, but I wasn't in a rush. Number 3. How'd his siblings not know what the guy was up to? And honestly, I don't know. Everything involving me was my first-hand experience. Everything that happened after that was second-hand information I got from his sister. I can't confirm what she told me. I can only share what she said. Question number 4. Why did I do so many upgrades in a rental? I wasn't tearing out walls or replacing floors. Everything I did was reversible and done to make my life easier. Also, the landlord was retired. The guy never raised rent and always gave permission. Even though I was renting, this was my home. Question 5. Why did the judge only give me 30 days to move out? The eviction process didn't happen overnight. I thought this was obvious, but some people seem confused. From the point that I gave him 3 months' notice to seeing a judge, nearly 2 months had passed. There is a timed process that has to be followed. Question number 6. How did I remove everything so quickly? None of the stuff was difficult to remove. The pond wasn't a small lake. It was a small 300-gallon hole in the backyard with a few goldfish and plants. It took us about 3 hours to drain and fill it in. The shed was sold to someone who took it away on a flatbed. Organizers were modular and appliances are simple to replace. The most time-consuming was replacing all the plugs with standard outlets and smart bulbs with regular bulbs. Question 7. How are we supposed to believe that you had all those receipts? I've been self-employed for 29 years. I keep every receipt because Uncle Sam doesn't mess around when it comes time for an audit. Most receipts come to my email, but I also have a portable scanner for everything else. And lastly, how could anyone believe the house had negative equity? Again, I can't speak for them, but I can share a personal anecdote. My mom died in 2022. While settling her estate, we discovered that she had a reverse mortgage. Essentially, a company loaned her money with no mortgage payments. In return, they had to be paid back if she died or tried to sell the house. The house wasn't worth enough to pay them off, so we just let them take it. Reverse mortgages are prevalent and often predatory. I don't know if he told them this, but it's not far-fetched to believe a house has negative equity. So I'm a high school English teacher, and I have 2 major annoyances when it comes to kids doing work. First, a lot of kids don't read or listen to directions. Assignment instructions are written on their papers, and then I read them out loud, but I still have students asking me, "What are we doing?" That's no big deal though. It's pretty normal to deal with as a teacher. The real issue bugging me is students cheating on writing assignments using ChatGPT. Now, I'm pretty good at spotting AI-generated essays, but the problem is, when I try to accuse the students of using AI, they deny it. They act outraged that I would accuse them, even though we both know they're playing dumb. I usually just give them a 0 and move on with my life, but there's always the fear that one might take the issue to administration. If they did, I'm not confident that admin would back me up. It's hard to prove something's AI-generated, and in these days, the higher-ups are more likely to side with the student. So I hatch a plan. One time, I gave an open-ended creative writing assignment. The direction said to write a story about anything you want, and then answer some questions about the story you wrote. The thing is, at the time, I don't know if it's like this now, when you ask ChatGPT to tell me a story, it always spit out the exact same story. Some story about this girl named Alara who lives in the woods. It would say something like, once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there lived a young woman named Alara. She was known throughout the village for her curiosity and sense of adventure, always eager to explore the world beyond the familiar paths of her home. So with that said, in a slightly smaller print under the instructions, I wrote, if your main character's name is Alara, minus 99 points to your essay. Well, lo and behold, I got 1 or 2 kids turn in a story about this girl named Alara who lives in the woods. When I turned back the papers with a grade of 1 out of 100 because I find it stings more than a 0, the kids predictably asked why. All I had to do was point to the instructions that they didn't read. There was no need to mention AI. We both knew what they did. Oh goodness, the good old days of writing essays for English class. I do not miss that one bit. And seriously, I can only imagine what teachers have to deal with nowadays when it comes to AI getting super good with solving math problems and even doing full assignments. That said though, there's probably another side to this that is just as annoying, when good writers get flagged as using AI when they didn't. But yeah, this person comments, here's the solution to the AI problem in schools. All writing is now in-class writing, with a pencil and paper if necessary. All homework is now just reading, and reading's tested with a weekly quiz on paper. We're trying to get people to exercise their brains here. Guys, let me know if you agree or disagree with this comment. I don't think that's a horrible idea. And if you guys enjoyed that post, this person shares a story where they get back at a teacher. So when I was in 7th grade, my math teacher attempted to fail me for the semester because I never did my homework. Anyways, so at the beginning of the year, this one teacher literally made us all sign contracts, stating how our final grades were calculated. They were as follows: 70% were tests, 15% was class participation, 10% homework, and 5% miscellaneous. And to be honest, he was pretty good at giving you ways to make brownie points, and I actually did like him as a teacher, but I guess he and I butted heads on the homework issue. Anyways, as I said, I'm a lazy piece of crap, so I never, and I mean never, did my homework. Especially for the lousy 10%. Like, come on. I was, however, also one of those kids that never studies and aces tests. And considering that tests were a whopping 75% of our grade, I was known to have something like 103% average by the end of the semester. Anyways, come our midterm report cards, and the guy gives me a 55%. The only thing in his comment section was poor homework diligence, or some BS like that. Well, lucky for me, I had kept a copy of that little contract, and therein began my first case of specific compliance. I first spoke with him, and I tried to reason that why would he fail me based on homework alone? Regardless of my homework accountability, I was also pretty often participating in class. Math has always been my preferred subject, and I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of natural for me, and for the most part, easy. Long story short, a 2-week-long debate culminated in a meeting with myself, my mom, my teacher, the vice principal, and principal, where the conversation goes something like this. I basically say, well, I just need to know where you justify this grade. I'm one of the top performers in your class, test-wise and participation-wise. And I'll be the first to admit that I don't do my homework all that often. But if that's the problem you have with me, why are you dropping me to a 55? My teacher says, I warned you several times. If you didn't start doing your homework, I was going to fail you. My mom looks at me and she asked, is that true? I respond, that is true. However, according to this contract we signed, because you gave it to us, homework assigned is 10% our final grade. Meanwhile, tests are 75% of our grade. My teacher then sputters and he says, I mean, yeah, but I gave you verbal warnings about your homework. I reply, so yes, my average test score is 103% for a 76% of my final grade. This should be the lowest possible score, and that's assuming I never participate in class, which I don't think you can say, can you? I mean, I feel I participate fairly often. On a scale of 1 to 15, what would you rate my participation? He tells me about an 8. I then say, okay, so that puts me at an 84%, doesn't it? So why am I failing? My teacher didn't say a thing. In the end, my grade changed to an 87. I don't think my mom's ever been so proud. Anyways, long story, but I complied with a contract, and to this day, screw homework. So enjoy this lovely exchange from Monday. I work in an online fulfillment at a large home, garden, and building supply store. My job title comes into play later, as technically, we aren't supposed to work with customers directly. We just point them in the right direction or find another associate who works in that department. So on this day, I had a massive order to grab. Several heavy and large pieces of sheet metal and screws. The problem is, the sheet metal size I need isn't where it's meant to be, so I'm having to scan pretty much everything to figure out what's what. But the bigger problem is this lingering in the wild put me in the range of a wild Karen attack. So this one woman comes up to me and she's raging. She screams, "Are you gonna help me or not? I've been standing over there forever and you haven't even offered to help me." I say, "My bad, I can try. I don't work in this department, so it depends if..." The woman interrupts me and she's suddenly actively hostile. And she says, "Try? No, you will. It doesn't matter if you work in this department or not. You're an employee of this store." At this point, I'm taking calming breaths so I don't lash back, wondering what this woman's problem is. So I say, "Okay, what do you need?" The Karen screams, "This." And seriously, I'm not joking when I say that she proceeds to pull out a screw and nearly stab me in the eye, shoving it towards me. I just push her hand away and I say, "Okay, ma'am, the screws are at the end of this aisle on the left." "What?" She then stops me again and she says, "I already know that." Me, getting angry, say, "Okay, well, what size is that? What size do you need?" Karen then gets angrier for some reason and she says, "You tell me. You work here." She then takes a step closer, trying to seem threatening. And me, unable to hold back, say, "I have no clue, ma'am. There's an entire wall of screws. It's impossible for me to..." She then interrupts once again, and she screams, "You will not come at me like that. Your manager would not like that." Me, no longer giving an F, say, "You think? Well, I can get a manager if you'd like. Maybe one of them can identify the screw by sight." And this is where the malicious compliance comes in. Karen says, "Don't make me mad today. Just do your job." Now, since my job isn't to deal with customers, I say, "Yes, ma'am." I then walk away from her to my trolley, and I proceed to continue looking for items in my order. Karen says, "What are you doing?" I respond, "My job." What was funny was an aisle over, one of our assistant managers actually was nearby. With Karen ranting and stomping like a toddler, I walked over when I noticed him and I told him I had two issues. One, I can't find the item, and two, he has a Karen he may want to talk to. He just laughed, and he showed me where the correct size sheet metal improperly was, and he totally ignored Karen, until she huffed loudly and stormed away. I don't think she liked that my manager did like how I handled the situation. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's in our entitled People episode, where Psycho Karens are once again getting arrested for the most ridiculous things ever. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.